I'm just waiting for confirmation that we are live, and I think we just went live. So, smile for the cameras, ladies. You all look absolutely beautifully. None of it eclectically beautiful. So, welcome to this show, ladies and gentlemen. I am in the presence of an amazing set of people, all of whom you will get to meet in a second. So this is just one in a series of amazing conversations where we get to meet the different sides of us, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Where we get to integrate all these different parts of who we are and take this to the next level. So we live in a world where we sometimes do not know where we're going. I call it an identity crisis. We try to do so many different things for so many different people, and we end up being absolutely nothing to anyone. And so we feel lost in our tracks. And the question is, how do we find ourselves? Depression is the mainstay, and we've touched it in so many different regards. And today we're going to be looking at it within the framework of the woman, how it impacts the woman. We know that men and women think differently, and they respond to challenges in different ways. Now the question is, how do we embrace this conversation? How do we start this conversation and embrace it in such a way that it is organic? Starting with push-ups, for instance, and before we know it, we're talking about the wiles of depression in a relaxed atmosphere where we can just come in and not worry about the stigma that it actually carries, the labels that it brings, and the shortcomings that it puts out there. And without much ado, I would like to start by introducing me to you, and I'll get Lorraine to introduce the rest of the panel. Before I start, have you ever ridden a bicycle? Can you ride a bicycle? Can you go back to that experience? The day when you learned how to ride a bicycle. I'll share my experience with you. So I was on this thing and I had someone behind me. They held it steadfastly and they were pushing, they pushed hard. And they asked me to paddle and to control. And I did that to the best of my abilities, and they kept saying, you just keep going. Of course, I was scared. At some point, he said, keep going, you're doing great. I didn't realize that he had actually let go. So for as long as I did not know, or for as long as I thought he was behind me, supporting me, I was good. And in my mind's eye, if he had let go, I would have fallen. But then he gave me the impression that he was still there. And as he pushed at some point, he let go, and I was just good to go. So I overcame my fear. And that's exactly what we're trying to do. That's the platform we're trying to create. We're trying to create this platform where you can come as you are, with all your shortcomings, with your strengths, with your weaknesses, with your vulnerabilities, which incidentally are your strengths, so that together we can lift one another up and be the absolute best we can be. Lorraine, over to you.
Right. Well, thank you so much, BK. And I really want to start by saying it truly is an honor to be back here. And especially just to thank Lambert for using this platform in such a profound and transformative way. So I was here last week and co-hosted with Lambert.
Hello.
Lorraine,
Hi.
all the way from Germany. All the way from Germany. So thank you.
Thank you too. It was such a hard work.
Yeah. Okay. So fantastic. We now have a full house, which is great. So, and so, last week I was on here with BK, and it was a fantastic panel and personally transformative for me, right? Obviously ever since that show, we got a ton of feedback, both in the comments. But I think just the whole experience of people sharing very personal stories and creating a safe space and an empathetic space where we could just have a good discussion and sort of really continue the discussion following up from obviously the physical activity of push-ups and really create awareness in our community was wonderful. And so the logical next step for us was to think about, well, how do we continue the discussion with women? Right. So we had an all-male panel last week. And so this week we have another formidable panel of just really wonderful women. And I have to say I cheated. And this time I went with all lessons. So Lambert had all lessons from Sacred Heart College. This week our panel are all lessons from Our Lady of Lourdes Secondary School in Bamenda, which is sort of the female corollary to Sacred Heart College. So we're going to have all of the panelists introduce themselves and talk a little bit about what they do. And then we have some areas that we really want to spark discussion today. And again, we do want this to be kind of a space where we just feel comfortable about talking about mental health and sort of really exploring this whole space, because it's something that we all agree, number one, is challenging for anybody. But I think particularly, because of our cultural norms, the additions of being immigrants and just all of the other areas and all of the intersectionality that we have, sometimes people really, are challenged with finding where exactly can I talk about this and who's going to listen and who's going to identify. And so I'm actually going to start with my god sister and my classmate, known each other since we were born, Dr. Najela Nukuna. So now could you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm really enjoying this. I am so excited to be here. First, because I think I'm the oldest on this group. So
a couple of months, just so we're all clear. Okay. Older by months.
So as Lorraine said, I'm really excited to be here, and this is a topic that's really close and dear to my heart personally, and I'm really, really privileged to be part of this wonderful panel. So to all of my younger sisters here, I kudos, and to BK, my brother-in-law and little brother and great dancer. I'm so excited to be talking with you all. So my name is Najela. I'm a chemist and love chemistry. So I've tried to navigate myself into other areas where I can use my knowledge of chemistry in, which is really wellness. So I am a big proponent of wellness, and this is really where where I think I can contribute to this topic, because the way we live, the way we love, and the way we live our lives interconnected to others is really critical to how we become, one with the universe and God's creatures. So I am married. I have 3 children. 2 are 26-year-old. Oh God, they'll kill me. But and a little 14-year-old boy, 15-year-old boy. So I'm actually with all the different generations that I can speak to. But thank you so much for inviting me into this panel.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And what Najela is probably too modest to talk about the fact that she actually has wellness programs, right? So this is not just a philosophy for her, but it's actually something she's putting into practice. And she has a huge following. Obviously, I'm part of that following, but she has a huge following from people of all ages, where she has very practical, workable programs. So be sure to tap into that, okay?
Thank you.
So I'm actually going to go to Sylvie, right? So Sylvie, did you want to introduce yourself?
All right. So thank you very much, Lambert, for having me. And I am very honored to be with you, senior lessons here today. And so I am Sylvie. I am a daughter, first of all, and my mom is also a licensed, so good license. And I am a wife and mom to 2 daughters. So, and I'm also a nurse practitioner. But I realized talking to my patients during consultation that most people, when they come in, they might be sick, but they really just have other things that are bothering them that are not related to their visit. So that's why mental health is really something that I am passionate about. And come to think about it, finances was a big part of it. So, due to personal experience as well, I have been motivated to become a financial coach. And so I am also into financial wellness. And that is something that I have been doing in the past year and a half as well.
Well, fantastic. Thank you so much, Sylvie. And we're really grateful for all the panelists who are on here today, right? It's just gratitude, right? So thank you all. I'm actually gonna go to Honorine, who's calling in all the way from Europe, from Germany. So it's a bit of a
Yeah.
over there. So Honorine, again, we're really glad to finally have you on. Could you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yes, hello everyone. I'm Honorine. I'm a mother of two boys and in a relationship. I'm not yet married. I don't know. I don't have any marriage experiences. And I'm a health and wellness expert. So when I got this opportunity from Mrs. Mbaku Gwen, I was so happy about mental health, mental health disorders and depression, anxiety, while this has a lot to do with my field, I'm a businesswoman as well as I would term it. So, and I'm so happy to be among those who you choose to be to be part of this show tonight. Thanks, Lambert. Thanks, BK. Thanks, Lorraine, and thanks to everybody for having me here.
Great to have you.
Fantastic, Honorine. And I think you finished your push-ups today, right? Was it
You
your
did.
last
Yesterday.
No, I did yesterday.
yesterday? Oh, wonderful. Okay. So, and Honorine, like she said, she's actually a businesswoman, right? She does, health and medical supplements. So we really have a power panel today. So that's wonderful. And we'll come back to talk about the push-ups in a little bit. And so I'm going to close out with our baby sister, Samantha. Sam, I think you're muted. Can you unmute?
Unmute yourself, Sam.
Hi everyone. Good evening. Good, not, I guess it's later up in Europe, but I really feel honored to be a panelist. My name is Samantha Ngu. I'm a management consultant, and a lot of people don't really understand what that is, but I'm a strategic advisor to the C-suite. I work on mergers and acquisitions, and I'm sure everyone's asking, what does that have to do with mental health? But I think it has a lot to do with mental health. I felt really honored when Sister Lorraine reached out to me and asked me to be a panelist, because I think mental health is something that we don't really discuss in the Black community. And I say Black community because I sit here where I'm hoping I'm going to represent three voices. So I was born in Cameroon. However, I've lived most of my life in North America, both in the US and Canada. And as someone who came to the US when I was relatively young, I think I've kind of embraced the culture here. However, I haven't lost my African or Cameroonian culture, and I hope that I'm able to bring perspective to what we're going to discuss. Overall, I think I'm going to be speaking or trying to address 64 million people, 64 million Black people, and I'm going to be specific why I picked that number. I'm going to try to represent 26 million people in Cameroon, 1 million Black Canadians, and I'm Canadian for the record, and the 37 million Black Americans who face similar mental health challenges. And I say that because I think when we leave Cameroon, we sometimes don't fully assimilate, and that's one of the contributing factors to the challenges that we face whenever we're outside of what I would call quote unquote home, given that I consider North America my home right now. So I'm very excited to sit on this panel. I think it is a known fact that Blacks or people of color face more mental health challenges, specifically anxiety and depression, because one, we don't talk about it. Two, we don't have the economic viability in order to be able to survive, right? And three, if you're in the corporate world, it doesn't matter if you're in healthcare, you face additional challenges, not only doing the work that you do, but the fact that you're Black in an environment where you may be the only Black person or one of few Black people. So that's a voice that I want to make sure that we don't forget. And as we address this, I also want to highlight the fact that I suffer from anxiety. And a lot of people are always very shocked that I have friends that say, how come, why don't you drive? Well, I don't drive because I get anxious behind the wheel. And I drove for maybe 10, 15 years before I noticed that I was getting a reaction that I didn't like. So now I just stay away from the wheel, even though stay away from driving, even though I have a driver's license. So those are the perspectives that I want to bring and some of the things that I hope that we're able to touch. And I was very honored when I got nominated by Sister Irene Ate to do the 25 push-ups. I'm about halfway through because I had a very difficult 4 weeks. It was 4 weeks of just working with no breaks, no Saturdays or Sundays off. And that's what management consulting is about. But I was able to come through. And I'm glad that the people that I nominated, some of them carried the torch for me. And today, a lot of them have reached their 25th day. And I still owe about 10 days. So I'm not done yet. I'm going to do my 10. I finish everything I start. I sometimes just don't do it in the time that it's expected. Well, that's a little bit about me. And I'm really, really glad and honored to be on this panel and looking forward to the discussion. So I'll turn it back over to the moderator.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you so much, Samantha. And I'm so glad you brought in this holistic perspective, both in terms of how we look at ourselves as Black people, but also our experience, right? You know, I think, you know, last week I even talked about this whole idea of minority loneliness, which, you know, Najla and I talk about quite a bit. But then also, finally, your personal experience with anxiety, because mental health obviously is a spectrum, and people really often don't think about, you know, everybody thinks about clinical depression, but there's different levels of it. So I'm actually going to piggyback on that to talk about the push-ups, and starting with you, Samantha, because first of all, you were on my list, right? I'm sure you were on quite a few people's list. Because we all know you finish what you start. Like you said, I know if I pick Samantha, she's going to do it and she will do it well. But one of the things that struck me was there was one of the days when you were doing your push-ups. I don't know if you remember this, but there was a lot of interruptions and people in the background. You posted the video, and then a little while later, you now posted another video, and you were like, oh, I repeated the push-ups, right? You did the push-ups all over again. So maybe just share with us a little bit. And I'm going to sort of go around the panel and ask versions of this, but, you know, what was it that motivated you about the push-ups in particular? What was your personal experience going through it? And obviously, you're still going through them, and the work pressures have kind of interrupted, but, you know, and then you've nominated people. So maybe just share with us a little bit about what that process means to you and how you see it amplifying the message of mental wellness in our community.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Like I said, mental health is not something we discuss in the Cameroonian community or Black community, right? There's a big stigma, and it's ironic that even at work, even people of color, Black people don't like talking about it, right? For some reason, it appears to be a sign of weakness. So I have a younger sister who suffers from mental illness. We do have mental illness in my family. And I, as I mentioned previously, suffer from anxiety. So once I was nominated, I thought this was my opportunity to kind of eliminate the stigma, right? I think certain people do definitely look up to me based on my professional accomplishments, but they don't understand that every day is a challenge, right? The anxiety you face, maybe the isolation in corporate America. I think I work for a company that has 300,000 employees. There are three Cameroonians that I know, right? Two in my group out of 1,000 people. So it's not like you've got the support there. However, you face whatever you face, right? So for me, this was an opportunity to lend my voice to something that I think needed to be discussed. Mental health. My younger sister actually has a blog where she writes a little bit about what she goes through, but mine is specifically anxiety when I'm driving or anxiety when I'm not able to control a situation. So that was one facet that I looked at. Even when I initially shared my anxiety with some of my friends, they were like, wait till you suffer from white man disease, right? So this was my opportunity to show that it's not white man disease, because I'm sure there are a lot of us who have the similar issues. I was on medication for about maybe 6 months, and then I got off because I had other complications that I needed to deal with. So I now try to manage my stress through yoga or exercise. And I joined Sister Najela's boot camp, and last year I lost 50 pounds. So I still have quite a way to go, but this was my way of investing in myself. So when I nominated people, I didn't only nominate people within the Cameroonian community, because I hoped this was a movement that will bear fruit outside of the Cameroonian community. And I did nominate some of my friends that I met either through work or through school. Some of them participated. It's a tough challenge, but I think I got the message out, right? Whether or not you participated and actually did the push-ups, it was my way of showing support for PTSD and all other mental illnesses that exist out there. And I did also pick some people, some Cameroonians who I knew were going to, they have a huge following, right? So we've got people like Diana Daiga, who's got a really great following. And it was amazing to see the number of people that reacted, right? And she definitely completed her 25 days yesterday. But my idea was to amplify the message and make sure that I eliminated some of the stigma, or hopefully did, by constantly posting and making sure that people understood that this is something we need to talk about.
Absolutely, in a way that's relatable, right? So, so congratulations on your weight loss. That's also something that you posted, right? You know, I follow you on social media, and you post a lot of the exercise that you do. So congratulations. Obviously, the whole issue of stress, you know, part of how stress manifests is weight gain, right? We know that. So, so that's a very visual way. And I'm glad you're one of Najela's disciples, because I'm hopefully going to go to her. And for you, Najela, the push-ups, like I said, push-ups are nothing, right? You know, you're this fitness person, you knock out 25, 50 push-ups like nothing. And I know your daughter also, Najela, she also did the 25 push-ups. So maybe share with us a little bit. I have to imagine that for you, watching so many people doing this brings you a feeling of fulfillment and other people seeing your vision. But maybe share with us a little bit just what this whole experience has meant, both to you personally, but for your community and the people that you see around you.
Yeah, so when Lorraine nominated me to do the push-up, I kind of knew it was coming because I had heard about it. So, but the most important thing, and Samantha, that's just a fantastic story you have shared to get us started here, and you're doing great. Honestly, you're doing great. She was actually one of the I would say the biggest inspirers in our group. She's such a great motivator, and as she says, when she starts something, she finishes. So I really looked forward to seeing her videos every day, and she always went ahead, above and beyond everything you gave her. This is the first time hearing she has anxiety, because she does an excellent job, you know. and I'm so glad you're sharing that now. In terms of the push-ups, I think the first thing was the fun part, right? And I think this PTSD, anxiety, all of these different variants of mental disease, they just need to know that it's normal. I think that's the first thing. That's the first message that came across. A lot of people took it as family affairs. A lot of people took it as fun affairs. Mine was most likely the most boring, because I just went for the traditional, and I was probably doing wide and close grips. I guess nobody knew how challenging those were when you go close or when you go wide. But really, I think my focus was just to get it done and show people that you can get to 25 and get to failure. When you get to failure, it's a huge achievement, you know, in anything in life. When you work to your edge, or when you go beyond your edge. I actually saw some people do 50. I saw Akumundi do his birthday 54 push-ups in a go. I saw staggered, I saw stacked, I saw raised push-ups, I saw Spider-Man power push-ups, decline push-ups, wife on the back push-ups, clapping push-up, wrist push-ups. I mean, it was dumbbell push-ups. It was amazing. And what this shows is that we are all interconnected. We are all interconnected. There were some push-ups that were actually fun to watch, but the fact that they all did it and finished and made sure that the message went through, and they actually had messages. The most important part was the messages that they shared. Some people took time to actually share their personal experiences. The one that touched me the most was, apart from BK is the guru of therapeutic push-ups. But there was one other guy, and unfortunately I don't know his name, who actually did his push-ups in the rain, crying. And he came up with this really touching story about his family that I think raised awareness. I really want to thank him for such candor and for edifying this whole process of what wellness means to all of us, and whether or not we want to start changing this concept of stigmatization of mental disease, because it's so prevalent in our community. And the more we talk about it, the more we act on it, the more we do fun activities like this, it really it's going to bring it out mainstream. And I'm looking forward to another challenge.
always pushing yourself, right? So, so now you touched on so many critical things, right? The whole point about a lot of people pushing themselves. I shared my story. For me, it was day 5 that I realized, oh my gosh, this is easy, right? The first 5 days for me were torture, and then I get to day 5 and I go, I can knock this out, right? So I think a lot of people had that journey. I love the fact that you talked about how we're all connected, right? It's community, right? All the people who now got together did it in fun ways, and it got the message out. So again, it wasn't just push-ups, it became this whole collective community experience, but also effective because we got the message out. And so someone who did that really well was Honorine, right? Honorine does really cool videos. Honorine does really great videos. I love your style. There's always
outfits,
outfits, just everything. So maybe Honorine, share with us a little bit about what the experience was for you, both personally, being across the world. Obviously, you're very connected across the Atlantic. I hear you even sometimes you talk to people in Cameroon, right, in Africa on your videos. So maybe just share with us what that experience was like for you, both personally, but when you think about your broader community with the push-ups.
Yeah. I'll tell you, when I was nominated, I had been following up of watching others doing it and sharing at the background. But when I was nominated, I was really taken by surprise. I wouldn't say so, because I thought it was something just based for those in America. And then and I would say it's quite the 25 push-up challenge was quite challenging for me, because I did that with a little bit of style in it, but it wasn't easy. Like I would say, the first day I did it, I had to do 50 push-ups because I mixed up the words or the alphabet. For my first video, instead of saying PCSD, I said PSCD. And then I realized it later. I realized it after finishing the 25 push-ups, and then I had to do it. And doing it again, I still made the first sentence was good. The second sentence I wanted to talk, I still mixed up PSCD, not PTSD. So I just said, no, I have to leave it. It was quite challenging, but I do love the experience, and I feel honored to be part of it. I wanted to really spread out to everybody out in the world that I know, because these issues are real. I would even say myself at one time, after the birth of my second son, and then being a single mom, then it was very challenging. And then I think because of the hormonal imbalance, and I had a little bit of depression.
Wow.
Maybe they will tell me postnatal depression, but I had a little bit of it, which
Mm.
Wow.
if I didn't take care of it, I could have then sunken deep into something else.
Mm-hmm.
So it's quite challenging, and I feel I'm so happy I was part of it, and I did it my own way because I noticed BK and his guys who were doing it to another level. I just love the spirit, and I said, okay, let me try to bring in something else in it. Some people I nominated took upon it, some didn't, or maybe they're going to do it later on. And I just love, other people trying to do it now. Like I love my sister, Fuawa. She did it high on heels and so perfectly,
Yes. Wow.
which was quite interesting.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. That's wonderful, Lorraine. And to, it brings so much joy when it becomes an experience that you enjoy and you feel honored, right? And the fact that you now shared even your own personal experience
Yeah.
with postnatal depression and sort of sort of just the worry and everything. So but it's interesting that you also talked about the fact that you had to repeat your push-ups on a particular day. So again, this
First day.
panel, we
Our
have a lot
first
of
village.
yeah, we have a lot of perfectionists and people who hold themselves to very high standards. So, but you've done a really effective job to get the word out and to get people talking about it. Like you said, you did it in your own way, which was a lot of fun, and we all enjoyed it. So, so that's wonderful. So Sylvia, I'm going to close out with you. Just around this whole question, with the push-ups and sort of your perception of them, and sort of seeing the collective community experience with them.
So initially, when I saw the push-ups, I was like, okay, what has this got to do with anything? Why is everybody doing push-ups? And the few videos I saw, everybody was getting dressed up, right? So I was like, okay, now I'm not doing that, right? But then when I had a step back, I was like, wait a minute, let me think about this critically. And then I realized that they're actually trying to do something beyond the push-ups. So it's again like the mental health that we're trying to do here. When you look at it at first glance, it's like your initial perception is, let me just, you stigmatize it. But then when you have a step back, then you have to think beyond what you think right? So that's what happened for me personally. And so when I was nominated to do the push-ups, I was like, okay, let me take my personal experience and what I have had patients tell me and what they've been feeling, and see how would you speak to somebody, what do they want to, what are they feeling. And so I try to put out personal messages to when I do my push-ups to out on the videos to those people, if they're listening, to know that we see you, we hear you. That's what I do. And then the other thing that happened, which I didn't know, was that my husband was nominated. He could not do push-ups. And so I was like, you can't do push-ups? Really? Okay. But then he decided to do it. And so he tried, and he got all these comments on Facebook, but he didn't give up. So I did another video which touched me, because it was saying that whether or not we're perfect, that's part of who we are. So we don't have to be perfect. Our imperfections are part of who we are. And that's also what the mental illness is telling us. So we shouldn't shy from that. So I'm having a lot of these realizations doing the push-ups as well. So it's interesting. And part of the realization is that, you can take a day or 2 or 3 or 4 off, which I did, and then come back. So it's okay to take a day off, as long as you finish it, like Samantha said. So I'm gonna hit the ground again and finish it, as long as you don't give up, right? So telling people when they have mental illness is that it's okay not to be okay, is part of the process. So somebody might do 25 push-ups and and knock it out like Najela is doing. And if you do 5 push-ups that day and still give yourself a kudos, that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I love your candle, Sylvia, and I know you had mentioned. I think we had commented about the fact that you put out the positive messages, which is wonderful, right? It's probably impactful. But I also love the fact that you talked about that it's okay not to be okay, right? We definitely don't want you to get PTSD from doing push-ups. So, but clearly, this is really BK's area. So, BK, we're going to segue to you, to sort of, I think Sylvie had quite a few nuggets in there, just sort of around, the whole mind piece and not feeling okay.
Yeah. As I'm sure you all would have noticed, I'm trying to talk as little as possible because you're all just so phenomenal. I like to cut across, well, pick nuggets from what all of you said, starting with Sylvie. So, Sylvie, the thing that you said that strikes a chord with my soul is that whole ability to show up. And I guess this is what this is really all about. See, because when you start showing up, there's one person who, apart from yourself, there's another person, Niba, who does this. Amabel Niba. She did it or does it so well because on day one, she couldn't do as much as a single push up. But she realizes that with every day, she can go up one notch. And I think this is what it is really all about because life is going to throw curveballs at us. And these curveballs are really our friends, they are not our foes. They look like enemies, but they're actually there to lift us up. So we have got Neba today, who's on day 7, and she's managed to pull 7 push-ups in 7 days.
Good.
So which each day she adds another push-up. On day 25, she will do 25 push-ups. What does that tell us? We are not our successes, nor are we our failures. In fact, these words don't mean anything. They only have these meanings because we've assigned these meanings to them. And that is the problem with diction, which we have got problems with labels. Because when you call something something, if we're not careful, we become that thing. And that is the power of the word. Imagine trying to articulate a particular experience you're going through and you're struggling to find the words. This is where misunderstandings creep in. See, because when you articulate something in a certain form and someone else plays it back to you and it's not exactly what it is you thought you wanted to say, you get frustrated. And then you can hit back. The other person sees a misunderstanding. They try to correct that. It may or may not work. And then you get this whole thing spiraling out of control and you're wondering what just happened. That is the power of words. So the word is supposed to give uh, a semblance, some semblance of reality. Well, it is not the reality for what it is reality as we perceive it. So it is trying to describe something that does not really exist, something that is way deeper than can be captured in those words. But when we capture it and articulate it in words, we become whatever it is we articulate. And if we're not careful, we get stuck in that rut. We get seen that way, we're perceived that way, we're described that way, and it becomes part of our identity. And that's where the problems start or begin. So when we show up, what are we in effect doing? We're rising up to the challenge. There are things that we actually get out of that we may not be cognizant of. So Sylvie, you started doing your push-ups, for instance, and obviously you get community joining in. People who are suffering from depression actually join in with the party, and it's an opportunity for them to express whatever it is they're facing. And these are the little gains, the little wins that we may not see at face value, but it makes a difference and it goes a long way. Moving on to Honorine, and I'd like you to speak a bit to this. You talked about postnatal depression. So again, we see you showing up. The question I'd like to ask you, and I guess Samantha as well, who talked about anxiety. But let's start with you, Honorine. Postnatal depression. Obviously, coming at this from a holistic point of view, we're talking about, so there's this organism, you as a being, there are all these hormones going on, you are trying to stabilize, you're trying to find that homeostasis and you've got all these things that you're worried about, all these thoughts going through your head, stresses, anxieties, and all whatnot. Honorine, tell us, what was it like for you, and how did you go through that phase? How did you overcome it?
It was, I would say, it was quite challenging. I, from the onset, I didn't really take notice. It was going to it was in that direction of a depression. It's the midwife who will later tell me this. It happens, due to maybe hormonal imbalances or oxidative stress. And then, first of all, it comes. I think also after explaining my situation, detail it to the midwife or the, I don't know how, yeah, midwife. I'll say my German and English. So then she came up with this with the diagnosis. This is postnatal depression, because of the situation. I just found myself alone, like a single mom.
Mm.
It wasn't easy. And then out here in Europe, we all know when you're having somebody, if you're all by yourself, you have your family far and wide. You could talk on telephone calls. You call my parents and talk to them. But personally, I was feeling alone. I was all on my own with a
Mm.
child, which I had to learn how to take care of. And then with the situation out here in Europe, there are rules and regulations. You're almost alone, or you are alone. So it was really challenging to me, but I think I'm a strong woman. I had to pick up. I had to face the realities of life. I had to know to accept. That is it. Because there are certain cases where you get depression maybe because of relationships, or peer group, and so many other things, which bundle up, and you just get a slap on the face.
Thank you
That's
for
how
that
it,
thought.
yeah, that's how
Yeah.
it came all about. So, but then it depends on, it's something in the individualistic, because it depends on each individual how you can handle your situation. If you seek for help, then you get it. If you don't seek for help, if you don't speak out, if you don't tell somebody your story, talk to somebody, then you get a solution to that. So that's how I did. And then with, also nutrition helps to balance. At times, lack of the rightful nutrition leads us to anxiety, depression, and which will go to the further stages of mental health disorders. So that did help me. And because I really had to, I lost, like hair loss and pimples. And the stress, the oxidative stress could be seen in my skin. This happens. It's something very common, but maybe happening in a milder way to some people. And some people, if you don't control it, if you don't talk to somebody, if you don't seek advice, if you don't seek for counseling, then it might go to another
Start
level.
out of control. I totally hear what you're saying, and I see
Yeah,
where you're going with
yeah.
that. Tell them, I want us to go see, because depression is not something that happens to us. It is a process. It's not an event. So there is a pathway. And what I'm trying to understand, Honorine, is when did it occur to you that something was not right? Was it before the baby? Was it during birth? Or was it after? At what stage did it occur to you that you were beginning to struggle with the self, or the concept of self? Can you speak to that? Just about 30 seconds.
Yes, it was after the birth, after the baby, after having my baby.
And
That was
what were
when.
the thoughts that went through your mind at that time? I just
Like,
want to.
you, first of all, like a woman, you sit there, you are alone, bringing a child alone. You think about your situation. What you think about what is going to happen tomorrow. What will my tomorrow look like? What future can I give my child if this kind of problems, in the society? It wasn't an easy something. I got threats from left and right, all those kind of things. It's really private, but it happens. There are so many women out there suffering or having such situations, which you have to brave through it.
Brilliant. Thank you
And
for
I
that.
would,
Thank you so much. Yeah, so
yeah.
Honorine, and so the point I want to make, or the point I'd love to speak to at this juncture, is that whole concept of the think, feel, act, cycle. Notice what Honorine said. She felt alone. Obviously, when you feel alone, the next logical thing or next logical step is you will feel lonely. And when you feel lonely, she did mention, obviously, there's fear. There's the element of fear which kicks in. There is that uncertainty. So she's unsafe, she's insecure, she's uncomfortable. And obviously, with these three, you would expect anxiety to join the party. And then you find yourself in a place where you feel stuck in a rut, which we could then call suffering, because in a place of suffering, you're not particularly sure how you get out of that rut. So you accept it as your reality. And that is how we start looking at depression. So we snap into that state of depression. But then notice that you've got your hormones as well that are trying to balance themselves out. So you have your hormones trying to do their thing, and you've got stress as well doing its thing. So cortisol and adrenaline are coming into the mix. They want to play, they want to party, and they are going counter to what the body is trying to do, which is recover. See, because cortisol and adrenaline will signal stress, duress, and what else? Suffering, pretty much, which goes counter to the grain of whatever it is the body is trying to do. So if you can control what it is you're thinking, and that's where family, that's where friends actually come into play. That is where diet equally kicks in. And it is important that we have these support structures that we can actually leverage, turn to, lean on. Because if there's nobody to turn on that or to turn to, then we are absolutely stuck in that rut. Let me come to Samantha. Samantha, you mentioned anxiety. And it's amazing because you two showed up, which is amazing. I honor you for that. You represent so many more than you would know. And like we said it at the beginning, you are that flagship, that inspiration for so many to look up to. What is it that made you decide that you were going to show up, talk about this anxiety, be true to what it is you were feeling, so you could actually start dealing with it, make it a public issue? How did that happen for you?
Thanks, BK. About 6 weeks ago at work, given the racial tensions that we've experienced in the US, we decided to have some coffee chats. And I was given a team of about 15 interns, MBAs, to hold a racial conversation. But one of the issues that we were discussing was mental health. So I mentioned before, the Black community doesn't really focus on it, but I really applaud the non-Black community or corporations for really taking the initiative on making sure that you're able to bring your whole self to work and that you're able to address not only your physical well-being, but your mental health well-being, because that actually impacts how you work. And I did share the fact that I suffer from anxiety. I work in an industry where I'm lucky I don't have to drive to work. Whenever I go to a client, they pay for it. So I take Ubers everywhere. So a lot of my friends would joke, I'm the person who will rack up the $200 Uber bill because I'm not renting a car. And that works for me right now. It's just I'm fortunate that I'm able to do that. So I'm able to still work, right? Because mine is debilitating where I can't drive on the highway. I'm so scared I'm going to get into an accident that I sweat, I get palpitations, and I can't drive. And I can't be on medication because of the side effects. So I did share with, they wanted us to share one thing, was how the conversation started. And I decided that was the day I was going to share the fact that I suffer from anxiety. And every time I start a new engagement, I always ask, is it close to the airport? Because I've been on clients in Boston where you land and you got to drive 90 minutes. I was lucky on that engagement. The manager that I was working with, it was very early in my career. He was okay to drive me. He was an African from Ethiopia. So he didn't mind the fact that he landed and he waited 30 minutes for me to land and we will drive to the client. So I shared that with at work, and I had someone reach out to me. So she's a Cornell MBA, working in strategy, very smart woman. And one of her fears was the fact that she actually suffers from anxiety and depression. And she was very grateful. She's not Black. She was very grateful that there was someone that she could continue the conversation. And I shared that at work, and she reached out to me. We had a one-on-one session, and we were very open and candid with each other. How do I make it work? And what were some of my tips for her? So I figured if I was able to help someone who was not Black or Cameroonian, it was my place to really show up and make sure that I continue the conversation. I've been blessed in my life, not perfect, but blessed, and I recognize that. And every time that I can give back in any shape or form, I try to do that. So that was the reason why I decided to show up and make sure that I was also going to represent people who had no voice. I have a couple of classmates, two to be specific, who suffer from severe mental issues. And as a class, we support them. Everybody knows my class is very cooperative, right? We support them mentally, we support them financially, but they don't have a voice. And today I stand not only for people who suffer from anxiety, but I stand here for people who are bipolar or also suffer from other mental diseases, because I don't think anyone chooses to be mentally sick. And I find people sometimes are more empathetic if someone says, I have cancer or I have some other kind of disease, right? You don't find that level of empathy generally, and I'll generalize, when someone says, I'm bipolar or I'm depressed. You don't find it in the Cameroonian community. If anything, people will call and talk about the fact that X, Y, and Z is mentally ill. They did not choose to be ill, right? So those are the voices, the voices that I want to represent here, and remind everyone not to preach to people that that's another illness, one that we do not control, but that one that we can manage. And I like when we talked a little bit about nutrition and what are some of the other natural remedies, right? So I take vitamin D every day because it calms me down, and I make sure I get sunlight. I live in Chicago where there's no sun, and I hate it in the winter. Right now, I'm trying to plan where I'm going to go for winter, right? Because I can't deal without sun. It gets me all anxious and everything. So there are things that I do to manage it. I manage my boundaries. If I feel like I'm getting overwhelmed, I'll say no. Doesn't matter if it's work. But those are some of the things that I do. But I want to make sure that I'm here as a voice to the voiceless, the people who did not choose to be mentally ill, but deal with it on a daily basis.
That's amazing. And to piggyback on that, there's something you've said, and I'm sure all our listeners will be waiting anxiously for this response, which you're about to give us. Now, if you were to make a comparison, before you started talking about your anxiety and after, now that you're talking about it, if you had the opportunity to make a decision based on how you felt before and how you felt now, can you speak a little bit to that narrative?
Absolutely, because even at work, there was a partner. Our ranks are kind of different in consulting, but there was a partner who was like the top level rank. And when I shared that, I noticed she wrote down a note, and she was like, I didn't know you suffer from anxiety, right? I think when I present or whenever people see me in a position to present, you always see the confident, well-spoken Black lady, right? But you don't know what happens before I get on stage, right? Where I'm scared I'm going to forget my words, or I don't want to have a panic attack like I have on the road, right? Or nobody knows why I tend to shy away from certain types of projects, and I don't want to get involved in anything that involves a 60-minute drive because I'm just not going to get behind the wheel, right? So for me, I think it gave me the freedom now that, and people are very empathetic. Sometimes you don't realize that they're going to be as empathetic. So what would I have told my younger self? Share more often, right? So people understand where you're coming from and they don't think you're being quote unquote difficult when you're not interested in anything that puts you behind the wheel for 60 minutes, because I just can't do it. I took a trip when I lived in Canada with my youngest sister. It was an hour and a half before she got her driver's license. I would share it here. And I would stop in the middle, like it was on the highway, and I would just get this panic attacks, and I would slow down and pull over. And about 30 minutes into the trip, she was like, she made this comment. She's like, this is a wolf. That's almost choking her, right? Because she couldn't understand what was going on. But eventually she knows. And we joke whenever we're about to do a long distance trip, I'll tell her I'm going to drive, and she immediately panics because she doesn't want to deal with my driving on the highway, and I don't want to deal with it. But it's a joke among us. And I'm glad that I'm able to share it with people. My family all knows if you're driving with me, you're going to drive. I've driven with my older sister 16 hours and she knows she's doing all 16. But she'll still invite me to come with her for the companionship, right? But she knows no one's going to put me behind the wheel. And I think sharing just alleviates some of the stress. Almost like what Honorine said, where once people know or once you recognize what you're suffering through, you're able to better manage it and deal with it as you have to. It actually really relieves you to be able to talk and understand what you're going through.
That's absolutely amazing. And one thing I'd like to leave with you is the following, Samantha. And it's amazing what you've done today. It's amazing the sharing that you've done with the rest of us. It's really uplifting, especially for those who are going through what you are going through. You can't even begin to imagine the rippling effect that it has and how far-reaching it is. I would love for us to have this conversation at some point, obviously offline, but this is the one thing I can give you for now. Obviously, the whole driving thing and the fear of getting in a crash is a trigger. Now, it is a trigger that reminds you of something way back in your past that you decided you were not going to deal with it. You were just not going to go there. Now, over a prorated period, you forgot what that thing was. You forgot what that experience felt like. It went deep down into your subconscious and it lost its label. Now, when these triggers show up, guess what? Those feelings, because it triggers your biochemistry, and the biochemistry that represented that experience shows up again. Trouble, the difference is you don't know what exactly that thing is, that pain. You just know that it's extremely painful. And it is possible it has nothing to do with an accident that you once you were a part of in your past. It just could have been something that was so painful that because you couldn't find the label, you found the next thing that could be so scary as to remind you of death, for instance. And for you, it was that accident. So you go to that thing with an excuse to not do it because there's this thing that's going on in you that you can't explain. And so you're looking for something that we use as a handle so you can explain it because you want to feel stupid. Am I making sense?
Totally. Yeah. So I actually went to one therapy session and I said never again. And it was one of the points that I was going to bring up, right? I think when you look at the issue of mental health within the Black community, one of the main characteristics, I always research everything because I want to back it by data, is the fact that we don't have culturally sensitive therapists to deal with our issues.
Yeah.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. And that's about to change. It is so about to change. See, because when we come at this from a holistic point of view, where we see ourselves not as the physical entities that we purport to be, but as spiritual beings having a physical experience. So as energy, you start realizing that you do not really exist until you define yourself a certain way. And if you can see yourself as just going through that experience, you don't get stuck in the experience. So you can go through, learn the lesson, and move on. You are amazing. We're going to have to continue this conversation offline.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Right. So there's one thing I wanted us to look at as well. What was that? It was generational attributes. You see, we live in a world where our parents do the very best that they can to bring us up based on what they know. Their very best intentions. They send us down a slippery slope. And sometimes we don't know how to deal with that. I'll give you a practical example. So you've got this chef. She's an amazing cook, and she's doing sausages. And she's acing all the competitions, but each time when she does her sausages, she cuts the ends and chucks them away. So the main chef asks her, "Why do you do this all the time?" And she goes, "She doesn't know. That's what mommy did." So they call mom to ask, "Why do you chop the ends of the sausages before you cook them or before you roast them or toast them or whatever it is you're doing with them?" And she says, "Oh, she doesn't know.
Mom did it.
Grandma taught it to her that way."
Sorry.
They call grandma. "Grandma, why do you chop the edges of the sausages?" "Oh, well, back in the day, our pans were so small, the sausages couldn't fit, so we had to chop them." This is what we go through. So our parents, in their ignorance and best intentions, teach us what they know based on what they were taught. We take it, we try to run with it, it doesn't fit. It's a square peg. We're trying to fit it into this round hole. It's not working, but that's what expectation says. That's what society prescribes. And if you don't do it that way, you're a failure. But Meanwhile, you know exactly who you are, you know what direction you want to go, but when you go in that direction, everyone frowns at you. So there's this cognitive dissonance within you. You're succeeding into your own demise because you're living a life that is not yours. It's almost like having a degree for your dad or your mom. And then you, at the end of that degree, you don't know what to do with yourself. What happens? I've got a friend who did it in a very in an amazing way. My dad insisted she did law. She did the law degree, took it to her dad. Daddy, here you are. I'm going into business. How many of us have the tenacity, the steadfastness, and the belief in self to actually embrace who we are? You can't embrace who you are until you know who you are. So, Lorraine, I'll hand that back to you, and maybe you want to run with it before then we decide how we're taking it going forward.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And I think, it's such a critical topic because I think it is common in pretty much every immigrant community, right? I know definitely Asians have written about this, right? The fact that within certain immigrant communities, the expectations are that you have to be better than even your parents, right? If your parents are immigrants, the first generation has to be better every generation. But I know definitely for sure in our African community, Nigerian community, Korean community, there's certain careers that are considered acceptable, right? There's certain careers that everybody expects their kids to be in or their children to be in, and a lot of times if the children try to do something differently, or something different or something that doesn't, if you're not a doctor or you're not a lawyer or you're not one of these big labels, people don't get it. I always joke about the fact that, my field where I am as a food chemist, I literally can count the number of Cameroonians on one hand because people just don't know about the field. So I think again for us, there's a lot of intersectionality. Generational issues are universal. Every culture has them. And then I think when you're an immigrant, it's double. And then when you're an immigrant of a certain status, right? Like we went to, you kind of had a certain status, a certain class before you came or whatever the expectations were. You have that. So you have the professional, but you also have it on a personal level. And I think, we can all speak to this. We even have it on a personal level where, if people are in a relationship or who even they associate with, a lot of times, the parents or a particular generation will want to make sure that there's no mental illness in the family. I think Angela had mentioned this at some point where they want to make sure there's no mental illness or there's no mental issues. And so it does tend to be a little bit restrictive, right? And it goes into, I think Samantha had talked a little bit about the fact that, people don't feel comfortable talking about issues because sometimes people don't respond well. It goes to the whole issue of stigmatization, right? People get stigmatized, and sometimes even a whole family, right? They have one person in a family, they think that person has mental issues, and so that whole family gets stigmatized. Sometimes again, it's associated with generational issues, but then it sort of cuts across. And really begins to have a negative impact. So quite a bit to talk about on generational issues, BK.
Absolutely. Would anyone else like to add something to that? Maybe something that we can all learn from experiences.
Yeah.
I would like to add that when it comes to generational issues, like Lauren was saying, there's something called the African tax that we have to pay, especially with those who immigrated here, the firstborn, right? So everybody expects you to automatically take care of like everybody back home. So there's that added pressure. So whatever you're dealing with, nobody cares. There's an expectation that you have to take care of all your aunties and uncles and everybody, that lives in the compound that you don't even know about. Now, you are already thrown into an environment that you're not familiar with, right? So culturally, you already feel displaced. Then you have that financial burden. So then there's the resources are not there, like Samantha was saying. So you have to deal with that, and then the pressure from back home. So it's finding out ways to navigate that. And another important thing that she did say was being able to set your boundaries. So, yes, BK, you did say that, we come from an environment where, it's all of these things coming at us at the same time, but being able to say no, like Samantha said, is very important for your sanity, right? Saying, okay, I can't take anymore. But yes, we have the African test by calling a mom and saying, yeah, I know I have 20 relatives, but at this time I got to take care of me. Because if I take care of me, then tomorrow I can take care of whoever I need to take care of. I think that's very important as well, you know. So that's self-care, whatever it is. If it's, just saying, okay, I need to eat right, I need to exercise, I need to sleep more, I don't need to work two jobs at this time just because I need more rest. Because a lot of us, when we come here, we need to work more, and that's sleep deprivation. That's important for our mental health. Because if you need the sun, but you're working so much, you're not going to be able to, get the sun.
Correct.
So that's something that's very important too.
Yeah, so I do wanna just piggyback on what both of you know both Sam and Sylvie said about boundaries, right? And then I'm sure Nigella will have quite a bit to say. I think as in general, most people, everyone talks about boundaries, but I think regardless of gender, people really worry about setting boundaries, right? And not just professionally, even personally. Sometimes people worry about how am I going to be perceived by my family, and then much less at work, right? So, but I think for women in particular, and especially for women of our culture, I think setting boundaries is even harder because everybody expects you to be, I don't like the term superwoman, but people expect you to perform like superwoman almost, right? You have to be able to do everything really well. I think it's very hard to talk about it, right? That's why we're probably having this conversation. And so we really have to think about, I think we all intellectually know that we all intellectually have boundaries, right? A lot of the decisions that we make, we logically have boundaries, but when it comes into practice, especially in our lives and how we associate with people, I think sometimes we find it very difficult to be empowered to set boundaries, right? About everything, even the food that we eat, right? People get judged. If you're on a diet, people make fun of you all the time, right? If you pick a person, so people get judged a lot. So it's very difficult to practically really think about the self power and again who you are. I think BK talks about how you define yourself, where it's really more internally focused and be able to set those boundaries. So Najila, I know you have a lot of thoughts around this. Again, you put it very well into practice, even practices like meditation and consciously thinking about how you want to approach a situation ahead of time. So are there things that you can share from that? And especially around that can help other women to feel
Yeah.
empowered and actually be able to practice this?
Yeah, I think there's so much I can say here, and I'll try to really personalize it because I think that's going to drive the message. So just piggyback to what Honorine said and what Samantha said about anxiety as well as postnatal trauma. So I'm going to try and link that to these generations of women. So for example, my mom or my grandmother, was able to just pop out like 8 children with no issues, right? And then my mom did the same with, sets of twins 3 times, no issues. I mean, sometimes I called her and I'm like, how did you do it? And when it came down to us, it was it just felt impossible, right? I mean, even with all the support that we had, I mean, I have a very supportive family. My husband would actually carry the baby for me if he had to, but it still is difficult. So the statistics, and when we complain, for example, when Honorine talked about what she went through, I'm sure a lot of people were like, oh, chuck it out. You can do it, right? Especially generations above her. But the truth is, 45% of women go through childbirth birth trauma. Believe it or not, 45%. And, I'm sure it varies with the different communities, but four out of this 45% end up with PTSD, which is the topic at hand here. So for them, and they have arranged this to meet the criteria of PTSD. So a lot of women are going through this. And out of the women, out of this 4%, in fact, a larger population of that 45%, about 18% of them with complicated births, with stillbirths, premature births, sick babies, 18% of those women get PTSD. If you think about that just in our African community and how much support those women have, I don't think we even know those statistics. Yeah, so when women sometimes give birth even to difficult circumstances, sometimes we don't even realize that they need space. You know, Lorraine just talked about boundaries, you know, just some space to heal. Some of us want to stay in the hospital longer just to heal before the crowd comes to celebrate. And I know that they are there to support, they are there for good intentions, they are there to support, but the woman needs space. As those hormonal changes that BK talks about, they need to settle down. Give her a week or two, or even some of them need up to a month to just settle down so they can be themselves. You know, so there are lots of symptoms that they face. Flashbacks of the birth. The birth process, I know we all say it's beautiful because you're involved in creation, but it is difficult. We can't hide that fact that it is difficult. So there are some women who experience this PTSD, who get those flashbacks, and it's actually a very traumatic event, right? And they start avoiding people, they refuse to go out, they refuse to go to their doctor's appointments. Some of them even want to kill their kids.
Oh yeah.
So you know, insomnia, issues like that really affect them. So the point is we need to support. All they need is just support. All they need is the time to be able to take care of themselves, because most of this especially the postnatal trauma, after about 6 weeks, 4 to 6 weeks, when your hormones balance, it slowly goes away. So that's for the cases, those are the cases that are not as traumatic. For other cases, if they don't get the proper support, it could skyrocket to something else. So it's just one piece of information that I wanted to share about PTSD for mothers. The other point that I really wanted to touch on, and I think Samantha kind of touched on it and Lorraine touched on it, is this concept of stigma in the family when there is a mental situation, right? So, I mean, all of us have children. Children will never be perfect, right? So you're going to have different variations of mental disease that you have to deal with. And those kids cannot be raised the same way our parents raised us. So the issue of immigrants raising their children, we have to be very careful how we raise children in the diaspora, because they're faced with totally different experiences. So I know I talked a little longer, but I think we really need to go across the board and discuss this concept of the variability of children and how our parents in a different generation raised us and how we need to raise these kids differently.
Yeah. Absolutely not. And I know that, maybe you can kick it off, right? I think you shared the fact that, all the way from your grandmother, who, by the way, was a formidable woman, all the way from your grandmother. And then now, even with your experience, right, your kids are at different ages and also different genders and, sort of different experiences. So maybe we can start off with you just talking a little bit about, what you see the differences to be, right? What are some of the flags? You did a fantastic job with just some really practical insights on postnatal, right? Just very simple things you can do, just ways. So maybe even with the generational piece as well.
Yeah, so in terms of, I mean, from my experiences, I think just having time to yourself. You're the woman who has popped out these kids. You need time. So if you can have a support system, very close support system, not a crowd, that can help you, give you some time to really spend time with yourself, meditating, getting that critical voice to only give you positive thoughts about, because it takes time to change those thoughts of traumatic birth to the beautiful creature. It's not automatic. So So meditation really helps. The types of food you eat really help. And the fact that you had a lot of weight gained as well, if there are issues with how you view yourself. So even just getting into weight loss programs very mildly without pressure, and having a supportive force. Honorine's was really difficult because she did not have, I mean, she was doing this alone. But Honorine, I would say, I mean, I know if you knew now what you would have done then, I mean, really reaching out to others to get help, because I'm sure there are women out there who would want to come and even just sit down with you for a week and help you out. So it's really critical to have that self time, to eat right, to drink, be hydrated, do your meditation. Some of the other things is just exercising. Yoga is fantastic for postnatal care. And the one thing that also happens is once you have gone through the first 4 or 5 weeks, sometimes there is a huge revelation for mothers where I actually had this very good friend of mine who was, strolling with her child. And that's one advantage of having these strollers that you can actually run. And the baby was 6 months at that time, and she had been going through postnatal trauma for a long time. And when she was able to, it actually hit her after 6 months that she loved that baby. And she said it was like a huge revelation. So that's when you move from PTSD to post traumatic growth. So it's actually where you start going above and beyond, and you become even more perfect than if you did not have it. So
Absolutely.
that's these strategies of really helping the mother to gain her confidence again, and gain her strength, and gain her body, and gain her love for her baby, could actually turn things around to the complete opposite, which is fantastic.
Yeah.
So that's what we should be striving towards.
Okay. Yeah.
I love that. That sounds amazing.
Yeah.
Lorraine, did you want to say something before I chime in?
Oh no, I actually was gonna call on you, BK, because I know with your whole practice around mindfulness and the mindset boulevard, this is actually, it ties into what Nigella said, right? Sort of describing the journey of this woman who's, this example is specifically going from trauma, the journey of post-traumatic stress disorder with postnatal depression to falling in love with her baby, right? So I think that's probably something that with your practice and what you do with mindfulness, we can relate to. We can relate to BK and maybe share a little bit more around that.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
And can
So
I
what?
chip in something?
Sure, go right
BK?
ahead. Sure, go right
Yeah,
ahead.
yeah, as Samantha said, or as Lorraine or Najila just said, this the anxiety, the depression, or the post-traumatic disorders, for example, the post-natal trauma, it happens when when a woman gives birth, you have that protective. There are two things:
Mhm.
you either love your baby or you want to shun away from the baby,
Yeah.
and you get that protective attitude in which you want to always have your baby by you,
Mm.
and then you stay. You as another point is to get out of that because of the society, oxidative stress, because of pressure from our peer groups. You have to go out, as she said concerning the woman with the stroller. You go to meet people, we talk with people, then you forget so many things. And then on the nutrition too, you have to work a lot on what you eat
Mhm.
when it comes to post-traumatic disorders, anxiety, depression. Nutrition matters a lot. We have to take a lot of omegas, from my own experience, a lot of omegas, which help, for the brain. It helps the brain, it helps curb anxiety, it helps curb depression. That's just what I wanted to chip in.
Okay, thank you for that, Lorraine.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. That's amazing. So, what I would like to say, what I'd like to add to what we all have said, Najera, you talked about mindfulness, you talked about meditation, when Lorraine talked about going out and meeting people, interacting, embracing, exchanging, and owning. What do all these things have in common? We realize they get us to a place of coherence as opposed to lack of coherence. So there is who we are, and then there is our fear. When we take away our fear, we ascend to who we actually are, and that is energy in its purest form, which we call love. I'm sure we would all agree that when we're in a state of love or we're in love, we feel invincible. When you come to that place, for instance, where you love your child, I'm talking about a mother. When a mother loves and bonds with her child, she comes to understand what I call unconditional love. And that is a place where it's counterintuitive when you look at it from a logical perspective. But if the woman and the child were in danger and the doctor said, hey, it'll be one of you, a true mother would be inclined to say, save the baby, I'm good to go.
Yeah.
There is something about that mother. There's something about her. She realizes that through that baby, she can live. She can actually come to exist and to live, well, live through her baby because she understands herself to be just energy. And that's what it really is. That is the essence of what we're talking about here. When we meditate, when we pray, what are we really doing? We're just going to a certain vibration, a certain frequency, vibration, or amplitude. Happiness is a vibration, anger is a vibration. So when we're in that relaxed state, all we're doing is we're going back to who we really and truly are. And in that place and headspace, we just know what we know. You know, there's an expression that goes something as such. It goes as such. The mind thinks, the heart knows. And so when you come from a place of heart, you realize, Samantha, I know you know this so well. You find yourself in a place where you're doing stuff you don't remember or recollect having ever done before, experiences you've not had before, but you just know what you do. I say this because of the nature of your job. There's nothing you can prepare for. Mergers and acquisitions, every single one is different. In fact, you could do the same one twice, it'll be two whole different experiences. Yet you come into a place where you find that state of flow and you just go with that flow and you glow in the process. It doesn't matter what life throws at you, you just feel competent enough to rise to the occasion. In fact, sometimes you know what you're going to do before the obstacle shows up. And you're like, how did you do that? I better be taking notes here. That is the higher you in action. That is the part of you and I that fear subdues. And to come back to talk a bit about the whole conversation about families and how families sometimes get in the way of our progress. No, they do not. They are there precisely for that reason. What we don't realize sometimes is that we have got an obligation and a responsibility to our families to help them grow as well. So when they come at us with all these demands, it is up to us to make them realize, no, this has to wait. We're going to have to prioritize. So we help them come up higher. See, because they're doing what they know. And if somebody doesn't educate them because they're afraid of being disrespectful, because I'm sure we all agree that in the African context, the whole concept of respect is a bit warped. If I say something, you better do it. If you don't do it, you're being disrespectful. Now, that is the concept of respect and disrespect, whereas it has absolutely nothing to do with that. And so the nugget I would love to leave with all of us today, I know we're running out of time. Now, this is how I go about life, and it's the exact same principle that I use when I deal and or engage with people in what I call strategic intervention, which is Mindset Boulevard. Now, the whole concept of Mindset Boulevard hinges on the following. Life begins in the mind. Whether we're praying or we're meditating, or we're philosophizing, or we're thinking, or it's a psychology, notice these are all the same words. They just morph into different things depending on the context we are at. Because if it's in the mind, it's not tangible. And if it's happening in the mind, that is the processor. So our senses do one thing and one thing only. They are like computer input devices, your keyboard. Our senses get that information in. Our mind is a bit like Microsoft Word. We write that program and our body prints it out. So if you're ill, just go back and check what you've been thinking. If you are ill at ease, go back and check what you've been thinking. If you can reverse that thought, then it moves from whatever it is you're thinking. And we talked about this the last time we spoke. Thought is energy. Energy follows thought. And when you've got thought and energy, the next thing is focus. And when you focus on something, you give it meaning. If that meaning is positive, it's a great experience. If that meaning is negative, it's a negative experience, and we suffer. And so that is the level at which we want to deal with things. So, what is this nugget that I keep talking about? When I deal with people, I've got three operating principles. The first of which is unconditional love, which means you're free to be whosoever you choose to be and want to be. You will not be judged. Not at all. You can swear, you can pronounce, you can trounce, you can clout, you can. It's up to you. You are more than welcome to do all of that. The next one is we can discuss sacred things so there are no taboos. Is it masturbation? Is it your period? Is it absolutely no taboos? Because I'm sure you would agree with me that if these words exist and if they actually depict something, it is because there is something good about all these things. When we make them bad, we separate them from us, and so our reaction towards these things are negative. But if they are who we are and a part of us, and we consider them negative, then we dissociate from them. And there's no way there won't be a conflict within you. And we know that conflict is the onset of disease. If you and I are in conflict, we fight. Two countries in conflict, there's war. What happens to the conflict that is going on within you? We don't talk about that. It instigates lack of ease, which we call dis-ease. Bring those two, and you've got disease. Even cancer is a direct result of stress. We just don't know what specifically is that stress because it's just the body reacting to something. Those cells start proliferating, and what you call that barrier is broken. They just keep growing to a point where they then obliterate a vessel, a blood vessel, or some other thing that is vital for your survival. So it all starts with stress. It doesn't matter. The medical doctors here will confirm. That's why when you go for a consultation, it doesn't matter what you come with. The very first thing that the doctor or the GP asks you is everything all right? Because it all stems from stress. And is this trapped? So, Samantha, we talked about anxiety. What do you think anxiety is? It is just energy that has been trapped in your body, in a particular area in your body. So that flow is not happening. And once you relax, that entrapment is released. There is flow. And it happens when you breathe, when you meditate, when you go and hang out with friends, when you go to a place where you can just flow and be yourself. And so that is anxiety. Energy that you have or that has been mobilized for a particular intent and or purpose. Now, the interesting thing is, as long as you mobilize that, so how does this come about? You know, sometimes we think about things that we have to do, but we don't complete the thought process. Women are very good at this because they're great at multitasking. They think sometimes they don't need to write anything.
You're on a panel of women, so
I know. And this particular topic, I can take on all of you. So,
really,
I'm sure you all know what I'm talking about, right? That whole, you guys are great at multitasking. And I know this particularly with my wife because she'd be like, sweetheart, you know, have you written it down? No, it's in my head. What happens with all these things that are in our head? Because there's no end-to-end process and we've not decided what we're going to do with that particular thing, it eventually recedes into our subconscious, but then triggers around us will orchestrate a scenario where we get reminded from time to time. This thing still needs to be done. This thing still needs to be done. You wake up in the middle of the night with a panic attack and you're wondering where it's coming from because there's nothing is happening around you. It's again that scenario where the label has been lost, but your subconscious is reminding you that there's unfinished business. And that is what anxiety is really all about. So anxiety is a state. You can't really see it. Panic is anxiety in action, in expression. So when you start manifesting, then someone can see that you're actually anxious, and that's what we call panic. But if you go back and you resolve that energy, which again we know is, well, it is obvious, it is more obvious when we have a deadline. So we know we can do something, a deadline is coming, and we know because of that deadline we may not deliver. Anxiety sets in. That one is a lot more obvious, and we know exactly what the root cause is. But for those who usually don't know what the root cause is, they just wake up in the middle of the night. It is usually typically things that they have at the back of their minds that they know they should be doing, because sometimes we know who we are and we know what we should be doing, but we're going in a different direction. Procrastination is another thing that will cause anxiety. Now, if we do not connect these dots, then we suffer from all these things, but because we can't pick them apart and understand the root cause and the root source, we end up doing what? Taking medication. It numbs the body, but it doesn't take the problem away because the problem is up here, not down here in the body. And the drug can't do anything because it doesn't matter how hard the drug works, that drug is actually going against the grain of the brain. Because the brain is saying, there's this thing that needs to be done. I don't care how often and how much you drug me, we're going to have to do this thing. You use the drug to numb the person, so it incapacitates the person. You've just created a new problem. Not talk about the side effects of that particular drug. Am I saying they don't have their use? They absolutely have their use. But when they are abused, then we have a problem on our hands. And it is on that note. No, I did not complete the whole cycle. So we talked about discussing sacred things, right?
Yeah.
The third one is where it gets interesting. And the third one is we push each other to grow. So I don't get to decide who is my friend or who becomes my best friend. No, you make that decision. And how does that happen? When you show up into my space, we engage. Beyond a certain point, when we've established that you and I have the same values, we're good. I'll tell you, I'll make a small speech. This is the way life goes from here on end. If I see something that's not right because I can see that we clearly share the same values, I have a responsibility and an obligation to let you know. Now, what you do with it is your prerogative. I'm not judging you. I'm just telling you because, hey, I thought you said this is where you wanted to go. You're taking this action. This is where it is leading you. And I can show you how it is going to ricochet and get you to that place. And is that really what you want to do? If the answer is no, okay, good. What adjustments can you make to go in the right direction? The point at which you tell me, sorry, BK, this is who I am. Take me or leave me. I'm like, good. This is who I am too. I'll always put it in your face. I'm not forcing you to do anything. Now, those people will automatically create a boundary. They wouldn't want to come back. Those who want to grow, they will gravitate towards me, and I expect it to be reciprocated. If you see something wrong in me, you tell me. Now, I'll give you a personal story. My relationship with my mom, she's amazing. I love her to bits. Now, my mom calls me the philosopher. In our home, with all our other kids, if something happens, and I mean, think of the worst thing, like somebody has died in the family. My, let's assume worst case scenario. When she lost her mom, my grandmom, rest her soul. She would go to everybody else and she would cry her eyes out. And of course, they'll give her a shoulder to cry on. But when she came to me, guess what? How the conversation went. It rolled something like this. Guy, you did not hear that we lost mama. That we lost mama. Mommy, I heard now. But what's the problem? How old was she? She told me her age. I said, okay. So basically, you do realize that now that she's gone, you're having to do things you otherwise would not have done if she were here. Is that true? She says yes. So basically, what you're saying is she forced you to grow, because if she had stayed here, you'd have remained a kid. Did I hear that correctly? She starts laughing. She just lost her mom.
Where is the empathy?
Right?
Where's the empathy? I would hug her. Hey, we would cry if we need to. I would hug her. That's the conditioning. That is the conditioning. Because see, she's come to me and she's not doing what she does with everyone else. Because don't forget, empathy means I can understand and I can feel your pain. That's where we normally typically would start. Mom, I love you, and I know that this is a difficult period, and we're gonna have to go through it. Cry if you have to, laugh if you have to. I'll join you if that's what it needs to be. But you do know we're going to have to move past this, don't you? The journey
Right.
starts.
Right.
So that's what I'm talking about. It's amazing. And the point I'm trying to make, I'm not trying to say that I'm anything special. I'm just saying that the conditioning that we put out there, if we have got the guts to be who we are and to really show up, if you're one who would cry and melt away, that's great. But there's something else that calls you to be in a different way. See, because ultimately, by and large, she will turn to me when she's looking for strength,
And
when
truth.
she wants to grow,
And truth,
when
right?
she needs someone to lean on. Yes.
Yeah.
And she will turn to someone else who's not quite wired that way if she just wants to cry, one needs a shoulder to cry on, and so on and so forth. So
Yeah.
that is the conditioning that I'm talking about. And we are all different tools. So we will all serve different purposes to my lovely mother at different times, subject to her need. But if we all became the same thing, then we are cheating her. See, because we're then pandering to what we think she wants, and we're not being who we are so she can grow as well.
Mm.
And this is just my mom. It's the same thing, same attitude. It'll be the exact same engagement with my friends, with my colleagues. Because again, this is the next thing. We talk about dissonance, we talk about multiple personality disorder. We don't realize that a lot of us suffer from it. Because if you're someone else at home, someone else at the office, and someone else with your friends, you're sick.
That's true. That's
It's
true.
just asymptomatic.
Yeah.
See, because if you are something, you should be that thing consistently. Because
And,
that's the only way you can grow
yeah, and be
and really
authentic.
come to fruition.
Mhm.
And it is on that note that I would love to say, for starters, I need to have all of you as my friends. Because the values that you have demonstrated here, honestly, I'd be honored and I'd feel flattered if I could be your friend.
Yeah. We're friends now, BK, right? Yeah. We're your friend. You can't get rid of us. We're here.
I'll hold you to that. So, if there are any questions, any last summary thoughts, the floor is open. Please take it, run away, run with it.
Yeah.
So I just added myself to the stream just because of the interesting nature of the conversations. And BK, I mean, I wasn't supposed to come on, but I just wanted to find out whether, do you think that personally, as an individual, you have any mental health challenge?
Do I have any mental health challenge? Yes,
Okay.
in a sense, yes, I do. I mean, we all do, right? There are times when I feel like I'm not particularly sure where I'm going. There are times because currently I'm in IT, right? And it, I went through a very difficult period. I was excited about IT. I loved what I did until I discovered that I was all about people. That I was all about what we're doing here, engaging people, meeting and greeting people, uplifting them, inspiring them, motivating them, getting them to be the very best they can be with the resources that they have, just with what they have. Now, when you come to a point where you discover who you are and you realize that your life is someplace else, it makes you think, it makes you worry because these two resources start competing. Now, I'm lucky in the sense that my work will support what I do, and what I do actually supports my work. Because I deal with clients on a daily basis, and if you understand your clients, then you can put them at ease and they leave you alone so you can do whatever it is you need to do to serve them. So this serves me big time and it actually compensates. But before I got to the point where I actually made this connection, I saw my work as one thing and I saw this thing as something else. And it
Yeah.
felt like they were at loggerheads. You then have to come to the place where you connect the dots and you realize that, oh, it is one whole. You can't separate one from the other. They both belong together.
Okay.
And then you leverage that as the case may be.
And so
So
that,
do I go? Do I go through those difficult periods? Absolutely, I do. But again, I have to therapize myself.
Yeah, I think self-definition is a lot. Self-exploration and self-definition is a lifelong experience, right? It's something that like, BK, thank you for sharing that. It's beautiful. Different people go through that in different ways, right? For you, the dichotomy was very clear because it was IT versus you want to be in a really social science, which was very different. Like there are two extremes. But I will tell you, and Najela can share this. A lot of people, even probably even Samantha, right? Even in consulting, even in fields that may be very close, people go between, do I want to be in management or do I want to be in strategy or do I want to be in a technical area? So it is a lifelong thing. And I think that is why I love this idea of just conversation, right? I love what we're doing because we rush to quickly look for solutions without truly exploring what the issues are. I love the example that Samantha shared about, she went to a professional and it wasn't a great experience. And professionals are great. We need them, right? But if you don't know what the problem is, you're never going to solve the problem, right? You're going to be solving the symptoms, right? BK, you talked about the fact that a lot of things start in the mind. And until you can explore and get to that place to know what the actual issue is, we end up doing a lot of this performative things, right? We see people do it all the time. Somebody would like write Black Lives Matter. Do they really believe that Black Lives Matter? And if they're held to it, would they do it? So that's just an example. But I think we tend to do that a lot in the decisions that we make around defining who we are, how our career fits in with our personal life. As women, you talked about the fact that women tend to multitask. The question people always ask is, well, as a woman, can you do it all, right? Can you be good at your career, good as a mom, good as a wife, good at a lot of things? And you can do it if you know exactly what you're doing, if you've explored and you define what is a priority at certain times, what's important. So I think that it ties into why we do this show and why we decided to continue this conversation, because the first step really has to be to spend that time and just explore without it being a consultation or looking for solutions, and just say, let me go into my mind and define myself. Because that really helps with everything else, right? If you don't know what the root cause is, I think BK, you did a really great job with, as Samantha, sorry, we keep using your anxiety as the example, but we all have examples. I shared my story of stress, the first show I was on, where I gained weight at work because I got into a leadership role. I felt the pressure to perform and I sacrificed everything else. And all of a sudden, my physiology was out of whack, right? My whole body was completely messed up because I wanted to succeed professionally. Now, I still want to succeed professionally. I'm still doing that, but I have my life under control because I went into my mind and I defined who I was. So I think it's very, the conversation, I think that's what we're trying to do here, to encourage people to get to the stage where we can comfortably talk about these issues, explore them, think about them in a holistic way, think about them as a lifelong journey, versus first thinking I have to fix something, right? Because when you think I have to fix something, then you're looking for medication or you're looking for alcohol or you're looking for a solution, versus really spending the time, Nat talked about meditation. That's what meditation does, right? You don't walk away from there and from there saying, this is what I'm going to do, but you walk away from there and go, maybe this is not the problem that I thought it was, right? You sort of explored it. So I think that's kind of, our whole thinking behind why we do want to have this conversation, why we talk about having a conversation and encouraging people to talk about mental health. And it's wonderful to have the panel here. Like I said, we were a super panel. I knew that, and maybe I guess BK to close, just to kind of go around the panel to get other closing thoughts. So Sylvia, I'm going to put you on the hot seat. I'm going to put you on the hot seat and start with you.
I would actually like to say a couple of things first. So first, I would like to say that mental health is highly individualized. So it's something that I would like us to take away from this. So unlike other illnesses and diseases that, you can say, okay, you'll have say a broken toe or a joint that you in 6 weeks you wear a cast, and if you project that you're going to take it off and feel well. Mental illness or diseases don't work that way. So I would like us to, when we talk about empathy, it is in showing up, like BK mentioned, it is not showing up how you think the person having the mental illness is expecting you to show up. It is showing up the way they need you to show up. And that starts with asking them how they need you to show up. So that's very important for us to take away from this conversation. So when you go to somebody, which is identifying, first of all, those symptoms of how are they feeling. So if you see somebody feeling sad or their demeanor has changed, they're crying a lot or they're sleeping a lot, or, asking them, how are you feeling? What do you need me to do? It doesn't have a timeline. Again, somebody who has anxiety or depression might not manifest the same way like the other person you've seen that has anxiety and depression. So let's ask them how they need us to support them. Let's respect them and their space, and let's be non-judgmental. And the last thing is I would like to say is we need to be realistic about the healing process. And those who are suffering from it as well need to be realistic about the healing process. So if you have, like you give birth to a baby and they say in 6 weeks you're going to feel better, it doesn't mean in 6 weeks get up and start pounding at you. No, give yourself time to heal. Have this conversation with your family. This conversation about, oh, you're a strong Black woman, that's part of the stereotype that is hurting us. So setting realistic expectation for ourselves is also part of the conversations that need to be had. So that's it. Thank you.
Beautiful, Sylvie. And it goes back to the boundaries and feeling empowered to enforce your boundaries, right?
Yeah.
I also love what you said about true empathy being about how the person wants you to show up, right? That's the platinum rule. The platinum rule is treat people how they want to be treated, right? The golden rule is how you want to be treated, but the next level is really how they want to be treated, which is wonderful. Samantha.
Yes, thanks so much. I want to thank everyone on the panel. I think it was an amazing and insightful session for me. Even though I did a lot of sharing, I also learned a lot. But I want to challenge everybody who listens to this to be empathetic, to try to get rid of the stigma. And it starts with each and every one of us. If we do our little to make sure that we're not stigmatizing people who are suffering from whatever form of mental health disease, I think as a society it will become a better place. So that's the last thing that I leave as a challenge to everyone who encounters someone else who's facing something, to be as supportive as they can be. And like Sylvie mentioned, not the way you think you need to show up, but ask them and be a little bit more empathetic to their pain and suffering. But thank you. This has been amazing for me.
Yeah. Fantastic. Yep. The whole lived experience. Wonderful. So Honorine, any last words?
Well, I have to say, I've been going in and out because I got low battery here. What will I say? I would say you just need to talk to somebody, exercise, change on your nutrition, and as BK said, the mindset, it's the mindset. Just work on yourself.
Yeah.
I did that. I talked out. I worked on myself. I came to realize the realities of life and had to accept it, and then everything will be fine.
Yeah. Fantastic. And you're a shining example, right? Share their personal experiences on this panel. Absolutely. And Nicola.
So great panel. Great. I've learned a lot as well. So I really want to finalize with a message to all the different generations, and I'm going to speak the language of the generations, just in case there could be one person who would listen to this to this discussion, maybe from Cameroon or from Nigeria, or so I'm going to speak in my grandmother's language that she can understand, which will be the Pidgin English, right? Say for mommy them where they try for advice their pikin them for marriage palaver. Make una know the look family, say some stigma dey inside some family for deny say may your pikin no go marry inside that family. Make una know the look culture, make una know the look the type of people, whether na pikin come out from Russia or whether I come out, una just look na the person is soul. Accept say any person with dey one world, we get one global, the world is round. So una accept people, una put una shoes or una put una foot for other family issues, because that pikin wey you talk say e get mental disease for that other family, if it be your own pikin. So make una not talk say some family bad. Coming down to our generation here in the diaspora, I will speak in our own language. Let's understand that our children are not equivalent. I'm talking to mothers here. Our children are completely different. We came with our own norms on how we raise children, how we were raised. Let children be individuals and become the best they want to be. We cannot put them in one hole anymore. So I have a mentor at work, and we talk about not just work affairs, but we talk about things in life. And he told me he has a daughter. I mean, this is a DuPont fellow, so this is someone who has reached the highest level in corporate America. He told me his daughter just wanted him. Well, he just called. His daughter was 25 years old. I need to talk to you, Daddy. I need to get your point of view. And he made up his mind because he knew that this was a trap for him, right? You know, it was going to be controversial if he went there, and he just went there and sat there for 25 minutes, and the daughter talked and talked and said some things that he didn't want to hear, and he just listened. And at the end of the discussion, the daughter came and hugged him and said, Daddy, that's all I wanted you to do. So I think that story really touched me in the sense that I think the biggest way to communicate to our children in the diaspora is by listening to them and really hearing them, hearing what they have to say, because they have a lot to say. They have another experience that's very unique from ours. So that's the message. And then I want to go down to the next generation, which is the younger ones, that they should also try to put their feet in their parents' shoes and understand that there is a generational difference between us. So if we can all come to the middle, we can raise a great population of Africans in the diaspora. And I'll end by just relating to Samantha's point of anxiety and to all of the other things that we go through. I don't think I go through anxiety. What I go through personally is lack of self-esteem, where I have to rely on others to tell me how good I am. And the one thing that has really helped me is just meditation. It may sound cliche, but if you go out and you just find your center, find that point where you are one with the universe, and you try to forget about the difficulties that you're facing. Just give yourself 5 minutes. Forget about the difficulties that you're facing and just look at the beauty of life, the beauty of nature. You know, you may think this is not African, but that's exactly what our ancestors used to do. Look at the beauty of nature and then count your blessings and forget about those problems. Take that critical voice that you usually have that is negative. And at that point, just look for the silver line. And for those 5 minutes, and then just do your breathing exercises, you know, breathe in, breathe out from the bottom of your stomach pit all the way out and you can start feeling your body heavy on your legs. When you come out of that experience, if you are able to do it even just for 5 minutes, trust me, you will come back to real life and you will face life in a totally different way. Whether it comes to your weight, whether it comes to your anxiety, your fears, it helps a lot. So, weight loss is a very difficult task. I understand it's $1 billion. That's why it's $1 billion
Yeah.
industry. So take advantage of your community, your interconnection with others. Take advantage of love for others. Put Ubuntu, put your feet into another person's shoe before you make any statement against somebody else. And just love. And I'll end there. Just love.
Whew. Wow. Yeah. I honestly cannot add anything to that. I mean, just beautiful, beautiful. So many nuggets in there. Beautiful. Yeah. So BK, I have no words. So on to you. I'm blown away by everybody.
That was all encompassing. I'll just
Just make sure I have 1 minute when you are done, BK.
I will do that, absolutely. So the running thread we've heard consistently is we need to learn to meet people at their point of need. Get to see the world as it is, hopefully not as we are. The challenge usually with meeting people at their need, at their point of need, is they usually have the answers within them, but they never know what the need is. And that is why therapy is a very delicate thing, because the person who's coming for therapy hasn't got a clue what is wrong. And so it is a science and it is an art, because it is in the process of actually walking the deep, dark corridors, going down the nooks and crannies of their lives. That is how you get to find the problem. And sometimes you solve the problem without knowing that you've solved the problem, because you put them so much at ease, they walk right past those ravines without realizing that they just swam the ocean with sharks and crocodiles, and they did not notice. So they come out the other end, and all of a sudden they realize, oh, that thing that used to be a problem yesterday is not a problem today anymore. And again, it's about how do you get them to a place where they think, because it's all about emotions. We are a cluster of emotions and conditioned reflexes that are triggered by experiences. As we come across them, as we encounter different experiences, we encounter different triggers, and they set us on fire, they set us alight, they get us engaged, they get us inspired, they get us motivated, they get us retracting, they get us moving forward. So it's about having that conversation, like Sylvie said, getting the person to explore their own feelings, how they are feeling, and what those feelings make them want to do. We've talked about this before. If you come to a place where you realize you're more predisposed to anger, then that is your addiction. Because anger is addictive. It's just another drug. We go there when we feel like we're losing control. So we want to control the environment, we want to control the people in that environment, just to get things to be our way, to get our own way. When what we should be doing is going back in ourselves, taking stock, breathing, refocusing, and making changes for desired outcome. Slow changes for desired outcome. For those of us who drive, when you come out of your driveway, you can't negotiate bends before you get there. You have to get to the bend before you negotiate it. Otherwise, you will crash. It's the exact same thing when we're dealing with people who have got conditions, these mental conditions, who don't know how to deal and process their own energies. They deny their energies because of the stigma that is associated with it. And we've talked about all these stigmas. Oh, be strong. Oh, be this or be that. We forget that being weak, being vulnerable is our greatest strength. All of us have cried. How do you feel after a good cry? You're in touch, you feel revitalized, like you can actually pick yourself up and run again. And that's why women live longer. That's why women are possibly better leaders.
All right, now you're talking, BK.
There are some painful truths. We're going to have to, acknowledge them.
Okay.
Just like I always give this example. Two women who are total strangers walk into the restroom and they come out best friends. Two men who are best of friends walk into the restroom and you meet them in and they look at two total strangers to each other. You're wondering what's happening. Now, women want to connect. Men generally, these are generalities, being general, obviously there are exceptions. But women generally want to connect because they understand that when they connect, you all know, if you've been in a meeting chaired by a woman, the typical woman, she comes in and she starts with small talk. First 5-10 minutes of the meeting, you guys are talking. What happened to the agenda? No, she understands intuitively that when people connect, they'll be able to engage and be their very best selves, and that's where we flow. Men generally are more, again, it's a cultural thing. It's all about power. It's all about conquest. So it's really authority and significance. You want to be seen as the done. So you want to wield power and authority, and that is counterproductive because while you wield power and authority, you lose the people you want to work with, which is very unfortunate. It's about understanding all these different dynamics and playing to our strengths and understanding that our vulnerabilities are one of our biggest and greatest strengths because that is where we find the self. And I'll conclude by saying the concept of me only begins when I interact and engage with you because you are the one who will bring out my weaknesses so I can be blessed to deal with them. Or you will bring out my strengths so I can revere them and take them to the next level. And that's what curveballs really are. Whether these curveballs are our kids, our siblings, our parents, our spouses, or our friends, they are designed to define, refine, streamline, prune, and get us to a place where we blossom like that lotus flower. And until we realize that that's what this is really all about, we run around in circles like an onion leaf. We consider life like that onion leaf, onion bulb, which we peel leaf after leaf, and at the end, we've got tears in our eyes and nothing in our hands. Lambert, you can take over.
Saying taking over is like I'm taking over after something. No, I'm just here to say thank you to you all because I mean, adding anything will be subtracting it, isn't it? It's been a great 2 hours, and I really want to appreciate each and every one. In fact, we could go on for the next 2 hours. Sylvia, I'm still going to come back to you to talk about the financial piece, isn't it? Because it's also part of the stressor for us, isn't it? In America and in diaspora, everybody is looking for money, and that adds to the stress. The mental health thing goes off the charts. Isn't one thing. How we deal with that is going to be perfect. We heard about nutrition today. A lot of the conversations, even though nobody gave us a recipe yet. Yeah. So again, that's an aspect, and Dr. Najela, look, it's just too many things that we can focus on to bring this conversation. Last time we talked about the next level, isn't it? And lots of comments, and unfortunately, the comments were all from Shesans. I don't know where the lessons were tonight. They were on the panel, and the Shesans were making the comments. But there's been great output. Samantha, I want to thank you. Thank you very much for sharing. Honorine, I know you had challenges coming on, but it was great. Just think about how you were able to share that personal experience. You know, I don't think you all of you might have known BK, but none of you, with the possible exception of 2 people or 3 people on this, none of you knew me, and so yet you were confident enough to be able to share that this is what you are going through. Samantha came out of the pack just saying, "I suffer from anxiety." I'm like, oh wow. I don't think that was. I mean, for me, it was so great hearing that, and that is why. Beyond this, 2 hours of having an interactive conversation, we need to take it again to a different level, isn't it? Continue the conversation so that others feel the same comfort. You know that there's a place where you can trust, you can come in and feel good. And after our last conversation, when we had the all Shesan panel with the lesson that made it a good house feast, we decided to create a WhatsApp forum, isn't it? And we're growing that gradually. And for us, it's going to create that space where, for people who are interested, somebody who has a need.
Somebody that will bring food.
Yeah, we can gradually build that because our community is suffering. Somebody wrote on the chat that There are lots of people going around with undiagnosed mental illnesses, lots of them, but hey, we just need to continue the conversation. I came in here just to say a very big thank you to each and every one of you. And it's not always, I always end up by saying, if I had to pay each of you for 2 hours, that's a lot of money, isn't it? Everybody just put in 2 hours. Samantha talked about rocking Uber bills. Who has that kind of money, isn't it?
So don't even go there.
So again, the only thing I can say is the service that we have done for the community and that we'll continue to do, because this is just the beginning of the conversation.
Yes.
Next Tuesday, I'm going to be hosting a similar show, but this time around, we want to talk about kids. There are parents who have kids with mental health challenges, okay? And again, within our community, it's not something that people want to share. Nobody wants to be talking about their kid who is a special needs child or something like that. But how do we break through that? Take care of ourselves, but also take care of our community. And I love the way you put it, Dr. Najalis. You said it, generation, isn't it? The parents, ourselves, our kids, how we bring this community together and bridge those differences in order to, again, highlight them so that our community can become a healthy community. So without taking more time, I wanted to share something, but I'll push it forward to next Tuesday. Last week, I received a call from a lesson who talked about another lesson who was in Chicago, wasn't it? And the mental challenges that the person was going through. But that was just as a result of this conversation. That is already telling you that the conversation is going out into the community beyond just the push-ups. And let's not drop the ball. I invite each one of you. I'm sure BK is going to coordinate that with Dr. Lorraine so that we can continue the conversations and continue to help each other. That said, thank you, good evening, and I'll see you all next week.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
It was an absolute pleasure.
Bye.